Good morning, children. Children, today we will be doing chapter 6 of our English reader book Flamingo, that is Poets and Pancakes. So, children, I think that you, like me, you would also be amazed on listening such a title, Poets and Pancakes, right? So, see what's there in the chapter. So, about the author, it is written that the name of the author is Asoka Mitrun, right? He was a Tamil writer. So, in this particular chapter, Ashoka Mitrun is remembering his years at a studio that's named Gemini Studio, right? So, he has recounted the days spent in that studio in his book My Years with Boss, right? So he talks of the influence of movies on every aspect of life in a country like India, right? You know, the Gemini Studios is located in Chennai, right? So it was set up in the year 1940. So it was one of the most influential film producing organizations of India in the early days of Indian filmmaking. So the name of its founder is S.S. Vasan, right? S.S. Vasan. So the duty of Ashoka Mitran in Gemini Studios was to cut out newspaper clippings on a wide variety of subjects and store them in files. You know, our writer Ashoka Mitran, his duty was there in Gemini Studios, and what was his task? His task was to cut out the newspaper clippings, right? His task was to cut out the images, some news, some material from newspapers, right, on a wide variety of subjects, like whatever things, whatever happenings are there in the society. So his duty was to collect material on wide variety of subjects and to store them in files properly, right? So many of these had to be written out by hand because sometimes certain things are not clear. Sometimes we want to elaborate those, we want to add description to those. So his duty was also to write certain things by hand, right? Although he performed an insignificant function, he was the most well informed of all the members of Gemini family, right? So, you know, self praise. The author is praising himself by saying that although he performed a less important role in Gemini Studios, but he considers himself the most well informed, means the person who has the information which is not with anyone else. It means he considers himself the most well informed, right? The most knowledgeable, you may say, the most knowledgeable of all the members of Gemini family, right? So the following chapter which we are going to read is just a part of his book My Years with Boss, right? So that's very much clear to all of you that the essay has been taken from a book. It was not written as such by the writer Asoka Mitran. He has taken it from a book, the title of which was My Years with Boss, right? So, you know, he was also a part of Gemini Studios, and in this chapter, the author has tried to give a fair insight into the lifestyle of those studio people, the staff of studio, how they all work, how a variety of people are gathered there, the makeup department, the story department, like all these have been described in detail, right? So, you know, besides a number of interesting incidents like the visits of MRA and the English poet Stephen Spender, those things have been described very clearly by the writer, right? So his works are characterized by simplicity and, you know, that clarity of thought, and drew from his professional as well as personal experiences. So whatever he has included in this chapter, that is taken from his personal and professional experiences of Gemini Studio, right? So I hope you are clear with the introduction of the chapter. So students, remember one thing, this chapter is not at all a story, right? As we have been reading some of the stories, the Tiger King, the third level, etc., right? So as we read Indigo 2 days back, right? Indigo is also not a story, that cannot be called a story, right? So like that, the present piece of literature, Poets and Pancakes, is not an exact story. It's a kind of piece, it's a kind of informatory piece, right? Informatory piece of writing that would tell us a lot about the life of people who make their stay at studio, how their feelings are cherished and how their feelings are hurt, right? So let's start reading the text. Pancake was the brand name of the makeup material that Gemini Studios brought in truckloads. I hope you might have got the answer to your question, poets. I hope that is very much clear, and you must be wondering what is the meaning of pancakes. Pancakes was the name of a brand of makeup material, right? So that brand was very famously used at Gemini Studios, and that was brought in truckloads. It means that was brought in a large quantity, right? Next is Greta Garbo, right? Greta Garbo is the name of a Swedish actress, right? So she is an actress. Greta Garbo must have used it. Miss Gohar must have used it. So these are the names of actresses. Vijanti Mala must also have used it, but Rati Agnihotri may not have even heard of it. So just in order to create the interest of the readers, Ashoka Mitran, the writer, is giving the description of certain actresses who used to wear that makeup brand, right? Who used to wear pancake makeup, right? So he is saying that this and this actress would have used this material of pancake, but the actress named Rati Agnihotri, she may not have even heard of it, right? The makeup department of the Gemini Studios was in the upstairs of a building that was believed to have been Robert Clive's stables, right? So see, Robert Clive's stables, they say, right? So what is the meaning of that? They are comparing it. As it is written, the makeup department of Gemini Studios was in the upstairs of a building that was believed to have been Robert Clive's stables, right? So it was on probably the second and third floor of Clive's building, right? A dozen other buildings in the city are said to have been his residence, right? Robert Clive's residence. So a dozen other buildings means about 10 to 12 other buildings were there in the city that were said to have been Clive's residence, right? For this brief life and an even briefer stay in Madras, Robert Clive seems to have done a lot of moving, right? So it seems that he has roamed a lot, he has moved a lot, right? So it means he has travelled a lot, right? Besides fighting some impossible battles in remote corners of India and marrying a maiden in St. Mary's Church in Fort St. George in Madras. So the writer says that Robert Clive's life was that he seems to have done a lot of travel, right? Besides fighting some impossible battles in far away regions of India, and his next move was to marry a maiden, and that too in which church? St. Mary's Church, that is in Fort St. George in Madras, right? So a brief description of his has been given. Next paragraph. The makeup room had the look of a hair cutting saloon with lights at all angles, around half a dozen large mirrors. At least 4, 5 or 6 large mirrors are there in every hair cutting saloon. I hope you all have visited that, right? So the makeup room of the place had the look of a hair cutting salon. Obviously people used to get, actors and actresses used to get ready there. They used to wear a lot of makeup, either good or bad, right? They used to wear makeup, and all the lights from all the angles should have fallen on their skin, so in order to see whether the makeup has been done in the accurate manner or not, right? Around half a dozen mirrors are there, right? Next line. So they were all incandescent lights, so you can imagine the fiery misery of those subjected to makeup. Incandescent means bright, right? So fiery means like fire, right? Like fire. So here the writer says that they were all incandescent lights, right? There were bright lights, so you can imagine the fire, right? Fiery means fire like misery of those subjected to makeup. It means the readers can easily imagine that what is the sad state of those people who were subjected to makeup, right? Condition of those people. See what he writes further. The makeup department was first headed by a Bengali who became too big for a studio and left. Means the head of the makeup department was a Bengali person who became too big, right? So he has probably talked by keeping his tongue in cheek. He says the head of the department was a Bengali who became too big for a studio, and too big means he began to consider himself a VVIP, right? That's why he left the studio. Next line. He was succeeded by a Maharashtrian who was assisted by a Dharwar, Kannadiga, an Andhra, a Madras Indian Christian, an Anglo-Burmese, and the usual local Tamils, right? So he was succeeded by whom? The Bengali was succeeded by a Maharashtrian, and the Maharashtrian has got an assistant by a Dharwar Kannadiga, an Andhra, a Madras Indian Christian, an Anglo-Burmese, and usual local Tamil people. So this all shows that there was a great deal of national integration long before AIR and Doordarshan began broadcasting programs on national integration. So again he is talking, keeping his tongue in the cheek. The writer says that means so many people were involved in that process of makeup team, right? So the makeup team's head was first a Bengali. The Bengali left the studio due to his superior airs, and then a Maharashtrian joined. Maharashtrian was assisted by many people from various states. So this shows that a great deal of national integration was there. The writer wants to say that the assistants from all these states used to work in peace and harmony, right? So they used to work together. Next is this gang here means group. This gang of nationally integrated makeup men could turn any decent looking person into a hideous crimson hued monster. Hideous, dreadful, Dravna. Hideous hued, hue means color, right? Monster, I hope you all know, that's a giant figure, right? So this gang of nationally integrated means these group of makeup artists, you may call nationally integrated makeup men means nationally integrated makeup artists could turn any good looking person into a very, fearful personality, hideous crimson, right? Fearful personality with very, black like color hued monster with the help of truckloads of pancake and a number of other locally made potions and lotions. So they used to potion as actually a kind of drink having some medicinal effect, and lotion you all know. So these are the kind of things which were used in the makeup room in order to make a person in order to make a good looking person look early for capturing some scene in the movie, and some ugly looking people, they were like the makeup was applied on their faces and arms and feet so that they could look beautiful for capturing some other scenes, right? So truckloads of pancakes were supplied to Gemini Studios, and these were well used by the makeup artists, right? So see what the writer further wants to say. So next line is that those were the days of mainly indoor shooting, right? The time we are talking of, so those were the days of mainly indoor shootings. Indoor shootings were there means out indoor inside the studios and indoors, right? And only 5% of the film was shot outdoors, means a very few scenes were shot outdoors, otherwise indoor settings were done, right? So I suppose the sets and studio lights needed the girls and boys to be made to look ugly in order to look presentable in the movie. They were made to look like that in order to make their suitability with the roles they are provided in the movie, right? So that they should look presentable. So I don't really remember the name of that particular movie, probably Bala, right? The title of the movie is Bala. So in that, Bhumi Pednekar, the actress, she has been shown as having much of the dark complexion, and that movie is actually a kind of breaking of stereotype, right? Stereotype breaking. So in that movie it is shown that Bhumi Pednekar's color complexion has willingly been shifted from pretty to ugly. Black color has been imposed on her skin, face, arms, feet, etc., so that she should look ugly, right? She should suit to the demand of the character which she is playing. So same thing is said here, that I suppose the sets and studio lights needed the girls and boys to be made to look ugly in order to look presentable in the movie, so that they should match their roles, right? Next is, a strict hierarchy was maintained in the makeup department. Strict hierarchy, strict line means ranks. The chief makeup man made the chief actors and actresses ugly. It means the chief makeup man, there were seniors, juniors, chiefs, etc. So the chief makeup man made the chief actors and actresses ugly. His senior assistant, the second hero and heroine, right, the junior assistant, and the main comedian, and so forth. It means higher the rank of a makeup artist is, so higher the people he will make ugly, right? So it means the duty of the head of the department was to do the makeup on the faces and skin of main actors and actresses. The second in hierarchy would decorate the second role playing actors, right? Junior, second heroes, you may say, second heroines, the junior assistant, and then the comedians. Means the hierarchy would move, and everybody would work with the person of his or her equivalent rank, right? The persons who played the crowd were the responsibility of the office boy. Now see, the writer has focused a lot on office boy. How? It means the players who played the crowd. We have seen, all must have seen the movie Bahubali. A lot of crowd has been shown in that movie. A lot of people, thousands of people, right? So thousands of people have been shown, and their makeup has also been done, right, according to the suitability of the role. So those are called a crowd, like players who play the crowd, who play the role of a crowd. So those people were the responsibility of the office boys, right? So even the makeup department of the Gemini Studios had an office boy. It means the writer has written it in round brackets. So that means that the makeup department of Gemini Studios was having an office boy. It means it was an unusual thing, because in those older times one cannot expect that the office boys would be there, right? On the days when there was a crowd shooting, you could see him mixing his paint in a giant vessel. Giant here means big vessel, right? So he is a huge vessel, right? Huge pot. So you would see on the days, it means when there was a crowd shooting, when there was a shooting of such a movie in which a crowd is involved. In that particular movie, one could see that the office boy mixes his paint in a very big pot, in a very big utensil, right, and slapping it on the crowd players. Slapping means doing painting on the face of that crowd, so that their color should be suitable to their role in the movie, right? The idea was to close every pore on the surface of the face in the process of applying makeup. It means his idea was to make their face plain, right? So close all the pores over the face, right, over that skin, in the process of applying makeup. He was not exactly a boy, he was in his early 40s. Now the writer is coming to the point. It means only he was addressed as an office boy, but he was not a boy, he was in his 40s, means he was an aged person, a bit of aged person, right? Having entered the studios, having entered means now the writer has started telling the story of office boy who was in his 40s, right? He must be 35, 38, 39 years old. So he entered the studios years ago in the hope of becoming a star actor or a top screenwriter, right? So director or lyrics writer, he was bit of a poet. Now our writer is telling that the office boy, that 35 or 38 years old man, he entered film industry, he entered the studio work many years before, and he was hopeful that he would become a star actor or a top screenwriter, right? Top screenwriter, director, or lyrics writer, right? It means he was having so many aspirations. He was a big dreamer. He had big dreams of achieving something extraordinary, right? He was a bit of a poet. It means you may call him a poet on some of the occasions, like he know some poetry, right? Next paragraph. In those days, I worked in a cubicle, two whole sides of which were French windows. Right? The writer is telling about himself that in those days he used to work in a cubicle, small rooms or enclosures attached to other rooms, small rooms. Right? He used to work in a cubicle, two whole sides of which were French windows, right? I didn't know at that time that they were called French windows. Means the writer was, otherwise he called himself well informed, but he was not aware that these are called French windows, right? Seeing me sitting at my desk, tearing up newspaper day in and day out, most people thought I was doing next to nothing. It is likely that the boss thought likewise too, right? So anyone who felt I should be given some occupation would barge into my cubicle and deliver an extended lecture. So the difficult word here is barge into. Barge into means to move inside, to move into in an awkward manner, in a strange manner, right? See what the writer is saying. The writer says that his work was, of course, I told you in the beginning, his work was to take out the newspaper clippings, right? He used to collect various kinds of materials, and often people feel that he is reading newspaper all the time, he is so free, right? We do consider that if a person at work is reading newspaper all the time, it means he is having plenty of free time, or either he is free, right? He is totally free. So the writer here says that, like, everybody used to think that I am totally free. Even the writer feels that his boss also thinks like that. As it is written, boss thought likewise too. It means boss also thinks alike other people, right? So anyone who feels that they are having much of the workload, so they would come to his cubicle, enter his cubicle in an awkward manner, and they begin to give a big lecture to the writer. They begin to speak over that you stay here for nothing, you are not worthy of anything, you are a useless fellow, or things like that. So he was always given extended lectures by one person or the other, right? So next line is, the boy in the makeup department had decided I should be enlightened on how great literary talent was being allowed to go waste in a department fit only for barbers and perverts, right? So what he says, soon I was praying for crowd shooting all the time. Nothing short of it could save me from his epics. So the writer here says that the office boy, the boy in the makeup department, the one who handles crowd, the one who, pays attention towards the makeup, who looks after the making up of those crowd players, right? So that man in his 40s, the one in the makeup department, So department had decided that I should be enlightened on how great literary talent was being allowed to go waste. He considered himself very intelligent. The man whose work was to apply makeup on the faces of crowd, right? He used to consider himself very intelligent, and he often used to say that he has a literary talent. He has a talent of writing poetry also, right? So his talent is being wasted and he has been put into this useless task, right? So he considers himself a talented person and he feels his talent is going waste in a department that is fit for barbers and perverts. Perverts means abnormal people, right? So soon I was praying for crowd shooting all the time. Nothing short of it could save me from his epics. So that means the writer was fed up with the talks of that office man actually, right? So the writer was fed up with the talks of that office man, that he used to talk about himself a lot, that he is so talented, he is so active in everything, right? So the writer kept praying all the time that crowd shooting be there. Why? Because if crowd would be there in the studio, so the office boy must remain busy in painting the faces of the people, right? So nothing short of it means nothing else could save the writer from his epics. You mean something that is very lengthy, right? So his lengthy lectures could be avoided by the writer only if epic shooting would have been there, right? So next paragraph. In all instances of frustration, you will always find the anger directed towards a single person openly or covertly. Covertly means openly or unopenly, in a hidden manner, right? Instances means examples. So writer says that in all the examples of frustration, you will always find that the anger is directed towards a single person, either openly means either in a straightforward manner or indirectly. And this man of the makeup department was convinced that all his woes means problems, troubles, right? He was convinced that all his problems, woes and ignominy, right? So all his problems, woes and ignominy and neglect were due to Kothamangalam Subbu. So a new character has been introduced. The office boy feels that all his problems, the ignorance that he faces in the studio, the neglect, right? So the inferiority he faces in the office, so all these things were due to the presence of a person named Kothamangalam Subbu. And the writer would describe this character Subbu in a bit detail, right? So I hope that's the clear till now, that the writer has told about the setup of the studio, some of the shooting things, that how shooting was done, like indoor outdoor things. And then he has told us about the office boy who considered himself very intelligent, but he you may call him a bit of a poet, but he was not much intelligent. He used to talk a lot, and the author he remained bored with the talks of that office boy, right? So in all the instances of frustration, the author says here that those are directed upon one person, either directly or indirectly. So you would see this in every other office, in every other department, that the gun is pointed at almost a single person, one or two persons, right? And of course here the office boy was at the point, right? So the office boy thinks that all his problems were there in his life due to the presence of Kothamangalam Subbu. So see who this personality was. So Subbu was the number 2 at Gemini Studios. It means he was the second most important person at Gemini Studios. He couldn't have had a more encouraging opening in films than our grown-up makeup boy had, right? So here it is written that Subbu couldn't have had a more encouraging opening. It means he got the best in film industry, right? So than our grown up makeup boy had. On the contrary, he must have had to face more uncertain, you mean uncertain means unpredictable and difficult times. It means the writer here says that, like, on the contrary, on the contrary, he must have had to face. It means he could also have faced many unpredictable and difficult situations. Why? For when he began his career, there were no firmly established film producing companies or studios. It means that, for when he began means because when he started his career, there were no firmly established film producing companies. It means Gemini Studio is one of the foremost company or one of the foremost studios that were established in the early years, right? Even in the matter of education, especially formal education, Subbu couldn't have had an appreciable lead over our boy, right? That means that Kothamangalam Subbu was not, more educated than the office boy. Often people having the same qualification compare themselves to the others, right? Suppose if two people are there at work and both are graduates, and the salary one is drawing is 50,000 and the other is drawing just 10,000. So the one who is drawing 10,000 per month would constantly compare his, educational qualification to the one who is getting 50,000 with the same qualification. Why? Because he or she thinks that they have the same caliber. People actually don't understand what the writer is conveying. A very beautiful thing he conveys, that people don't understand the relevance. People don't understand the importance of skills, right? So it is the matter of skills all in all, right? So here the office boy feels that, like in the case of formal education, Subbu didn't have any appreciable degree, right? Any degree which can be called enough, right? So he is strongly of this view. Next line. So, but by virtue of being born a Brahmin, a virtue indeed. The writer is commenting, as he has put a sign of exclamation. He says, by virtue of being born in a Brahmin family, that he had got the virtue, means he had got an edge over him because he was born in a Brahmin family, and he must have had exposure to more affluent situations. Affluent, rich, prosperous, right? Affluent situations and people. It means Kothamangalam Subbu must have exposure to, rich and prosperous situations and people. He must have been fed well. He must have got a better atmosphere at home. So that's why the office boy thinks that he lagged behind and Subbu got success, right? Next line is, he had the ability to look cheerful at all times. Now children, see, the narrator is all full of praise for that person Kothamangalam Subbu, that he had the capability to look happy. He had the capability to show a happy face at all the times, even after having had a hand in a flop film. Flop, failure. So that means that even if some of his movies used to get flop, used to receive a failure from the audience side, he was always cheerful. He kept himself happy in that situation as well, right? Next is, he always had work for somebody. He could never do things on his own, but his sense of loyalty made him identify himself with his principal completely and turn his entire creativity to his principal's advantage. He was tailor-made for films. The author, the writer is all full of praise for Kothamangalam Subbu. He says that this person was very good at work, but the problem in this person was that he was not much self-dependent for his works. He always wanted somebody's help. He always wanted a helping hand in order to accomplish his tasks, in order to complete his tasks, right? So, but the good point about him was that his sense of loyalty has made him identify himself with the principal completely, right? So he had such a sharp creativity. He has such a, a piece of, he had such a piece of creativity, you may say, that he was called that he was tailor made for films, right? So he was very well fit for his work, and is, as in the next line the writer says that here was a man who could be inspired when commanded, right? So he says that here was a man who could be inspired. It means in whom we can infuse a spirit of positivity. When commanded means when given any order, means you can assign him any kind of task and you will see a spirit of positivity in him, right? The rat fights the tigress underwater and kills her, but takes pity on the cubs and tends them lovingly. I don't know how to do the scene, the producer would say, and Subbu would come out with 4 ways of the rat pouring affection on its victim's offspring. Right? Good. But I'm not sure it's effective enough, the producer would say in a minute. Subbu would come out with 14 more alternatives. So see, the writer is saying that he was actually gem of a person, right? Whom we call gem of a person, the man or the person or the being, the one who has a lot many qualities. That's why he was called tailor made for films. So it is like that whenever producer was in any kind of problem, he used to discuss it with Kothamangalam Subbu, and Subbu was always ready with the solution to the problem. And if the solution was disapproved, a bit disapproved, or the solution was disliked by the producer, Subbu would come with 14 alternatives. It means that the writer wants to say that Subbu was always ready with several solutions to the same problem, right? So if one solution doesn't work, he used to go for the other one. So it means that he was having very creative mind. See the example. He says, the rat fights the tigress underwater and kills her but takes pity. A rat fights the tigress underwater. A very awkward situation, right? A rat fights the tigress, and that's too underwater. And the rat kills the tigress. How can a rat kill a tigress? But Subbu had solution to that. Rat kills the tigress, but rat takes pity on the cubs and loves them lovingly and treats them lovingly, right? So such a kind of scene, such a kind of incident that is very awkward in listening. So things like these were also tackled by Kothamangalam Subbu, right? That's why he became number second in the studio. That's why he got so much popularity, right? I hope that's clear up to now, right? See what next the writer talks of. The producer used to appreciate Kothamangalam Subbu's views, but sometimes he used to object them, and Subbu often gave him some alternate results, right? Next line. Filmmaking must have been and was so easy with a man like Subbu around. If ever there was a man who gave direction and definition to Gemini Studios during its golden years, it was Subbu. It means Subbu was the same person who had regulated Gemini Studios for a long period of time, right? It means it is written here that if a director was needed here, it means if some person was needed who could give direction, who could show direction, or who could deal with every kind of problem, who could give solution to every kind of problem, so that was Subbu only, right? Subbu had a separate identity as a poet. It means he had poetic talent. He had the talent of writing poetry also. And though he was certainly capable of more complex and higher forms, right? He had got his identity as a poet, and though he was certainly capable of more complex and higher forms, means that he was capable of doing higher things. It means writing poetry is of course a noble task, but one can do much better works as well, right? So he deliberately, deliberately means knowingly, janbujhkar, right? So he deliberately chose to address his poetry to the masses. He used to address common people in his poetry. Why? So that he can get a lot of attention, so that he can get praise from people, right? Next line is, his success in films overshadowed and dwarfed his literary achievements. A very beautiful line, or so his critics felt. Means Subbu couldn't become much popular in writing poetry. Why? Because he was so successful in filmmaking industry that his name was established in Gemini studios and in the film industry of India, that nobody paid attention towards his poetic talent. Nobody knew him as a poet, right? He composed several truly original story poems, right? He used to write that form, story poems, in folk refrain and diction, and also wrote a sprawling novel, Thilana Mohanbam Lal, with dozens of very deftly etched characters, right? With dozens of very deftly means skillfully drawn. Deftly etched characters means very skillfully drawn characters. Like his writing skills were so creative that one would feel fascinated, right? So he quite successfully recreated the mood. Quite successfully recreated the mood means he could change the mood and manner of the Devdasis of the early 20th century. It is said that he quite successfully recreated the mood. It means changed the mood and manner of Devdasis of early 20th century, right? He was an amazing actor. He never aspired to the lead roles, He never took the first roles, the role of main heroes. But whatever subsidiary role he played in any of the films, he performed better than the supposed main players. Children, I don't want to give any example here, but there are some heroes like who don't take leading roles or who are not given leading roles. In fact, they play much better than the main hero, right? So they play some subordinate roles, but actually they have the talent of playing better roles than the main heroes, right? So Subbu was one of that kind. He had a genuine love for anyone he came across, and his house was a permanent residence for dozens of near and far relations and acquaintances. Acquaintances means known people, right? So, a very beautiful line, writer says that Kothamangalam Subbu had a real love for anyone he came across. Means whosoever he used to meet, he used to deal them with love and care, right? And he has also given shelter to many people, to his known persons, his relatives, his friends, right? A lot of people, it is written here. It was a permanent residence for dozens of, it means 10 to 12, right? Dozens of near and far relations and acquaintances. It seemed against Subbu's nature to be even conscious that he was feeding and supporting so many of them. So, see, the writer says that Subbu never thought that he is spending so much money on the food and shelter of so many people. He never thought of these money matters. Such a charitable and improvident man, and yet he had enemies, right? Improvident, a kind of thrifty person, right? He was such light-mooded person that he was having a charitable mind, and yet he had enemies. Of course, children, try to understand the context of the line. The writer says that yet he had enemies. The people who are very good, they always have enemies, right? Because they are, people feel jealous of them, right? Was it because he seemed so close and intimate with the boss? Some people became his enemies because he seemed so close and intimate with the boss, because his relations with the boss were very good and very close, right? Or was it his general demeanor that resembled a sycophant, right? Demeanor means his behavior, right? Resembled, that looked like a sycophant. His, features may have looked like a sycophant, a kind of flatterer, sycophant, flatterer, right? So his features must have looked like that, but he was not actually so, as that is already discussed in detail. or his readiness to say nice things about everything, or people may hate him because of the reason that he used to praise, or he used to say nice things about everything. He was full of praise for other people, he was full of praise for things always, right? In any case, there was this man in the makeup department who could wish the direst things for Subbu, right? Who could wish the direst, means direst here means the worst, the most horrible, right? So here the writer tells us that the makeup boy was always jealous of Subbu, right? He very clearly mentions here that the makeup boy was jealous of Subbu, and he always prayed direst for him. He always prayed that this person, Kotamangalam Subbu, should receive horrible situations in his life, right? I hope that's clear up to now. Next paragraph. You saw Subbu always with the boss, but in the attendance rules, right? But in the attendance means in the counting rules. He was grouped under a department called the story department, comprising means consisting a lawyer and an assembly of writers and poets. It means a gathering of writers and poets. So he was categorized under that department. The lawyer was also officially known as the legal advisor, but everybody referred to him as the opposite, right? As the tendency of the people, they always refer to him as the opposite, right? Next is an extremely talented actress. So children, now the writer is narrating an incident. An extremely talented actress who was also extremely temperamental. Temperamental, the people are often bringing changes in their behavioral patterns. So she was extremely temperamental, right? But talented also. So once blew over on the sets. Blew over, means begin to shout on the set. While everyone stood stunned, everybody was looking at her in an surprised manner, shocked manner. The lawyer quietly switched on the recording equipment while she was shouting, right? What the lawyer did? He switched on the recording. So when the actress paused for breath, the lawyer said to her, "1 minute, please," and played back the recording. It means the actress was obviously not aware that her voice is being recorded and she is talking in such a harsh tone, right? So the lawyer interrupted her, asked her, "1 minute, please," and he played back the recording in which the actress was shouting. So there was nothing incriminating or unmentionably foul about the actress' tirade, right? So what the writer is saying, so he says that there was nothing incriminating, right? Nothing incriminating was there, or unmentionably foul, right? Unmentionably foul means bad, right? About the actress' tirade. Actress tirade means the speech, the violent speech which she gave, right? The violent behavior which she displayed. About the actress tirade against the producer, right? So next what happens? But when she heard her voice again through the sound equipment, she was struck dumb. She was struck dumb means she was left dumb after listening to her own voice that was recorded in the equipment. It means she must have felt so much of the guilt that what she had spoken and in what manner she had spoken, right? Children, you must have seen people regretting whatever they spoke or regretting their behavior with the other people, right? So here also, the situation was same kind of, right? So the actress heard her own voice through that sound equipment and she was dumb after listening to that. Sorry, a girl from the countryside, countryside, rural area. She hadn't gone through all the stages of worldly experience that generally precede a position of importance and sophistication that she had found herself catapulted into, right? So here the writer here says that catapulted into, that means lifted up, right? So she was from countryside, and before proceeding means to go before, right? So she was from a rural background, and she had not faced all the stages of the worldly experience because she was not an experienced person, right? And she was not aware that generally precede means go before a position of importance and sophistication that she had found herself catapulted into. Like, she had been lifted to the status of an actress, and she was not able to remember it at that time of shouting in a rude manner. She forget that if this recording can be heard by somebody else, or if my sound, my shouts are heard by the other people around, like what would be their reaction, right? So the writer here says that next she never quite recovered from the terror she felt that day. It means obviously her reputation was spoiled, and she could never recover from that fear that she felt that day. She was afraid because she had spoken out of the norms, right? That was the end of a brief and brilliant acting career. The legal advisor, who was also a member of the story department, had unwittingly brought about that sad end. Right? Unwittingly brought about that sad end. Unwittingly means unintentionally. So, that person, he brought an end to the career, the short and brilliant career of the actress. Right? She was a talented person, but due to her attitude, due to her behavior, that could not be carried on, right? So while every other member of the department wore a kind of uniform khadi dhoti with a slightly oversized and clumsily tailored white khadi shirt, the legal advisor wore pants. He used to wear different kind of clothes. Everybody used to wear khadi dhoti, right? That was slightly oversized, right? And clumsy tailored means that was stitched in an awkward manner, bit awkward manner, right? With white khadi shirts. This was the uniform for all the people over the set, while the legal advisor used to wear trousers, pants, right, and a tie, and sometimes he used to wear a coat that looked like a coat of a male, right? Often it is written that he looked alone and helpless, means people could see and feel that he looks alone and helpless, he looks aloof, a man of cold logic in a crowd of dreamers, right? So coat of mail, armors, and logic means reason, right? So awkwardly, so it is described that often he looked alone and helpless, a man of cold logic, a man of you may say a man of bad logic, bad reason, right? And in crowd of dreamers, a neutral man in an assembly of Gandhiites and Khadiites. A neutral means having a neutral mindset, neither obeying nor protesting. He was that kind of person, but he was an odd one in the assembly of all the people who were Gandhiites and Khadiites. Gandhiites and Khadiites means who used to follow Gandhian ideas and used to wear khadi clothes, right? So he was a bit different from all of them. Next line. Like so many of those who were close to the boss, he was allowed to produce a film through a lot of raw stock and pancake were used on it, right? Like the writer here says that like so many of those who were close to the boss, right? Who were close to the head. He was allowed to produce a film, though a lot of raw stock and pancake were used in it. It means a lot of stuff was used in it, but he was allowed to produce a film. Not much came of the film. It means the film was not a success, right? Then one day the boss closed down the story department, and this was perhaps the only instance in all human history where a lawyer lost his job because the poets were asked to go home. So a kind of self-contradictory line, the writer has written that he was given a chance to produce a film, but that was not much successful, right? Then one day the boss closed down the story department, right? And why it happened? Probably because the only instance in all human history where a lawyer lost his job. It means this is rarest of the cases. This is one of the unique cases that a lawyer lost his job, a lawyer lost his profession because the poets were asked to leave the place, right? Next paragraph. Gemini Studios was the favorite haunt of poets like. Favorite haunt means favorite visiting place, the place which is visited frequently by people, right? So the Gemini Studios was the favorite haunt of poets like, children, you need to remember the names also. Poets like SDS Yogiyar, right? So Sangu Subramanyam, Krishna Shastri and Harendrapath Chattopadhyay. So the one I have often heard of is Harendranath Chattopadhyay, right? So the studio was often visited by these people. It had an excellent mess which supplied food. Mess, you know, the place where one can get a variety of food items, right? So it had an excellent mess which supplied good coffee at all times of the day and for most part of the night, right? So it supplied coffee. So I hope that's clear, the timings is clear. Those were the days when Congress rule meant prohibition, right? Prohibition, and meeting over a cup of coffee was rather satisfying entertainment. Means it is the talk of those days when the Congress rule meant prohibition. Prohibition means ban on the sale and consumption of liquor, right? When there was ban on the sale and consumption of liquor. So at that time, meeting somebody over a cup of coffee was rather satisfying entertainment. So it was a sort of, otherwise, you know, taking liquor alongside somebody, alongside some friend as a kind of entertainment considered by people. But at the time when there was a ban on liquor, so at that time meeting someone on a cup of coffee was rather satisfying entertainment. So it was considered good at that time, right? Bearing the office boys and a couple of clerks. So he writes bearing, stopping, right? Bearing the other boys and a couple of clerks, right? Everybody else at the studios radiated leisure, a prerequisite for poetry. You know, except, bearing means except here, or stopping, or else, right? Except the office boys and some clerks, everyone else at the studio radiated leisure. Radiated means reflected, seen to have, enjoying, right? Pleasure, right? Everybody was having that leisure time, some free time to reflect. A prerequisite for poetry. Prerequisite, you know, children, that means a pre-requirement, a requirement that is must before the beginning of something. You know, poets need a free time, some free time in order to make their mind relax, calm and quiet for writing poetry. In fact, that is also a kind of lie, I would say, or that is not the, you know, universally accepted line that they need a little bit time. In fact, poetry, you know, as stated by Wordsworth, as a spontaneous kind of thing, is so spontaneous that it comes all of a sudden and it can come at any point of time and it cannot come for several years, right? But the fact here in the lesson is that the poets used to relax, right? Most of them wore khadi and worshipped Gandhiji, but beyond that they had not the faintest appreciation for political thought of any kind. So the writer says that most of these poets used to wear khadi clothes. They worshipped Gandhiji means they were full of appreciation for Gandhian thoughts, but beyond that means after that they had not even the faintest. Faintest means little, right? They had not even the slightest appreciation, right? Slightest appreciation for political thought of any kind, right? So they were not involved in any kind of political thought, right? Naturally, they were all averse to the term communism. They were all averse to the term communism. They were, you know, well versed with that. A communist was a godless man. They considered, yeah, right? Poets considered that a communist was a godless man. He had no filial or conjugal love. Filial, you know, that filial means that is pertaining to children, pertaining to son or daughter, right? Conjugal means married. A communist was considered a godless man, so because they have no spouse or children love. They had no compunction about killing. Compunction means regret, right? They have no regret about it. They have no compunction about killing his own parents or his own children. It means these communist people do not even regret killing their own children or killing their own parents, right? He was always out to cause and spread unrest and violence among innocent and ignorant people. Because the work of a communist is always to spread and cause unrest, right? Unrest, disorder, violence, right? Create violence among innocent and ignorant crowd of people. It means communist people are always supposed to disturb the peace of mind of other common people, right? Such notions which prevailed, right? Notions means assumptions here, right? Such assumptions which prevailed everywhere else in South India at that time also naturally floated about vaguely, right? Vaguely means that is not clear, right? Prevailed means spread. So, which spread everywhere else in South India at that time also naturally floated about, that is not clearly among the khadi clad poets of Gemini studios. Khadi clad poets means the group of poets, those who used to wear khadi clothes and visit Gemini studios. Evidence of it was soon forthcoming. It means the writer will tell us the proof of this statement in the next paragraphs. When Frank Buchman's moral rearmament army, some 200 strong, visited Madras sometime in the year 1952, they could not have found a warmer host in India than the Gemini studios. You know what the writer says here, that Frank Buchman's moral rearmament army, MRA, right? That was addressed in the very beginning as well. MRA, like some 200 strong visited Madras. So they visited Madras, Chennai in 1952, and they could find Gemini studios in order to stay there. It means they could not find anyone else who could give them a good kind of shelter, right? Someone called the group an international circus. They were not very good on the trapeze, and their acquaintance with animals was only at the dinner table. But they presented two plays. You need to remember these two. They presented two plays in a most professional manner. There, Jotham Valley and the Forgotten Factor. These are the names of the plays, children. Jotham Valley and the Forgotten Factor. So these plays ran several shows in Madras, and along with the other citizens of the city, the Gemini family of 600 saw the plays over and over again. Family of 600 means including actors, including the employees, everybody, they saw the plays again and again. The message of the plays were usually plain and simple homilies. The message of the plays were plain and simple. Homilies means sermons, right? Kind of, when we teach something, preach, right? But the sets and costumes were first rate. It means their message was simple, their message was plain, but their set and customs were very good. Madras and the Tamil drama community were terribly impressed. Madras and Tamil drama community were terribly means like they were greatly impressed. And for some years, almost all Tamil plays had a scene of sunrise and sunset in the manner of Jotham Valley. So it was said that they too used to put such kinds of scenes, that the scenes of sunrise and sunset in the same manner of Jotham Valley, which they viewed in the stage play, right? So with a bare stage, a white background curtain and a tune played on the flute. It means exactly they copied the same things from those plays. Like it was such a it created such a good impression, right? It was some years later that I learned that the MRA was a kind of counter movement to international communism, and big bosses of Madras like Mr. Vasan simply played into their hands, right? So the writer here says that It was some years later. It means after several years he came to know that MRA was a kind of counter movement to international communism. In the previous page also, the writer was talking of communist people. Actually, he was showing a kind of anger against those communists, and here he says that he was not aware that MRA, the team which came to Gemini Studios, MRA was a kind of counter movement. It was a kind of opposite movement to communism. And the big bosses of Madras, like Mr. Vasan, simply played into their hands. Means it was all about politics that was played by the big people. Right? I'm not sure, however, that this was indeed the case for the unchangeable aspects of these big bosses, and their enterprises remained the same, MRA or no MRA, international communism or no international communism. Right? The staff of Gemini Studios. So the writer here says that he was not sure, however, that what was indeed the case, what was the case in reality, right, for the unchangeable aspects of these bosses, because they are often felt that they are quite adamant in their cases, and their enterprises, it remained the same, be it MRA or if they are non-MRAs. So international communism or no international communism, like all were involved in a kind of dirty politics. Right? The staff of Gemini Studios had a nice time hosting 200 people of all hues. Hues means all colors. So black people, white people mixed, right? So and sizes of at least 20 nationalities. It means that was an international team and 200 people were there, and Gemini Studios, staff of Gemini Studios had a very good time with all these people. So it was such a change from the usual collection of crowd players waiting to be slapped with thick layers of makeup by the office boy in the makeup department. Now, children, the writer has come back to that makeup boy, not that boy, exactly the man who was in his 40s, right? So now it was such a change from a usual collection of crowd players, right, who were waiting to get slapped from with that paintbrush that the boy used to do makeup with, right? They were all waiting for their turn so that they can get a makeup and shoot their scene, right? Next paragraph. A few months later, the telephone lines of the big bosses of Madras buzzed, right? It means they got a message. And once again, we at Gemini Studios cleared a whole shooting stage to welcome another visitor. What the writer means by this? The writer means that the Gemini Studio again got a call from some visitors that they are going to visit their studio, and they must be staying there for a few days. Right? So Gemini Studios cleared a whole shooting stage means the studio was so much ready to help those visitors stay there, so they cleared the whole shooting stage. It means they cancelled the entire shooting, those appointments which were fixed for those days, and they welcomed the guest, right? All they said was that he was a poet from England. It means during the phone call it was said that he was a poet from England, right? Some poet from England may be coming. The only poets from England and the simple Gemini staff knew or heard of were William Wordsworth and Lord Alfred Tennyson, right? The more literate ones knew of John Keats, P.B. Shelley and Lord Byron. And one or two might have faintly come to know of someone by this name Eliot. So who was the poet visiting Gemini Studios now? So see, in a handful of words, the poet has clubbed so much of the literary talent. The writer here talks of many writers. See, he mentions William Wordsworth and Tennyson, Keats, Shelley, Byron, right? Eliot. So the writer here means that the Gemini Studio staff knew many poets from England, many writers from England, for example, Wordsworth, Tennyson, Shelley, Keats, Byron, and Eliot, right? But the name of the poet who was coming to visit Gemini Studios was not revealed on that telephone call, right? So everybody at the studio was wondering that whose call has been received by the boss, and like why the boss is so much impressed by that so-called English poet that he has postponed all the shooting appointments, right? So they are wondering and guessing the name of the poet. He is not a poet, he is an editor. That's why the boss is giving him a big reception. Vasan was also the editor of the popular Tamil weekly Anand Vikatan. So, children, the people are talking that the boss is not welcoming the person because he is a poet. In fact, the boss, he is a big fan of editors, as he may get good quality of scripts from that writer or editor. In fact, that person is an editor, right? So they start making guesses, as often when the people have less information or they have no information about the names of the celebrities, they often begin to make guesses. So the same was done here, right? The people here are guessing that he is an editor. That's why their boss is giving a lot of importance to him. Next paragraph. He wasn't the editor of any of the known names of British publications in Madras, that is, those known as Gemini Studios. See, the writer says that he was not the editor of the known names of British publications. It means 2 British publications were there in Madras, right? So, that were known by the people of Gemini Studios, the staff of Gemini Studios, right? And there was nobody from those 2 editors. Since, next line, since the top men of the Hindu were taking the initiative, the Hindu newspaper. Since the top men of the Hindu were taking the initiative, the surmise was that the poet was the editor of a daily. Surmise means guess. Again a guess, as I told you, they were making guesses. The surmise was that people were thinking that the poet was the editor of a daily newspaper, right? But not from the Manchester Guardian or the London Times. Means again they are discussing like from which publication house or from which newspaper, from which publisher, like he is from where. Everybody is keen to know that. Everybody is very eager to know that, right? That was all that even the most well-informed among us knew. It means most well-informed means the most active, the most intelligent and knowledgeable people at Gemini Studios knew only these names which are mentioned in this paragraph, right? And they have guessed that nobody from these publication houses is coming to their studio, right? So see the tendency of the people who actually want to know, and they cannot get it from the right source, that is they cannot get it from their boss. In fact, they are they keep on guessing the name of the person who is coming. Next paragraph. At last, around 4 in the afternoon, the poet or so-called editor arrived. At last, their wait is over. He was a tall man, very English, very serious, and of course, very unknown to all of us. Children, the poet has pointed out on a literary point of view, right? He will reveal a name that is not much popular, yet he is so important. So the writer here says that he was a tall Englishman, he was very serious, and obviously he was not known to, he has written, of course, very unknown. It means he was very known to all of them, right? Battling with half a dozen pedestal fans on the shooting stage. Pedestal, who were there at the base to support. That means he had passed through some of the people who were there as his supporters. The boss read out a long speech, right? So, battling with half a dozen pedestal fans means who were there at the support. So, a few people were there. So, the boss read out a long speech. See what was there in the speech? It was obvious. Obvious means very clear. It was obvious that he too knew precious little about the poet or the editor. It means the staff came to know that the boss himself was not much aware about the achievements of that poet or the editor, right? The boss himself was not aware of that. He had a little knowledge. The speech was all in the most general terms, but here and there it was peppered with words like freedom and democracy. Peppered, peppered means to sprinkle something, right? To sprinkle something on something else. For example, peppered term is especially used for when we say namak mirch masala laga ke kuch batana, right? So his speech was exaggerated, you may say, in simple words, exaggerated with words like freedom and democracy. Probably he wanted to attract the attention of the listeners by using these terms, right? Then the poet spoke. He couldn't have addressed a more dazed and silent audience, right? He means poet. Dazed means who are looking in a very stunned manner, right? Very silently. So the poet couldn't have addressed a more dazed and silent audience. No one knew what he was talking about. It means nobody could understand the wording of the poet, right? And his accent defeated any attempt to understand what he was saying, right? His accent defeated any attempt to understand what he was saying means his accent, his way of speaking, his pronunciation, it was so different, right? The writer wants to say that his accent defeated any attempt to understand what he was saying. It means he was using such pronunciation, he was using such accent that nobody was able to understand it, right? The whole thing lasted about an hour. It means he spoke for an hour. And then the poet left and we all dispersed in utter bafflement. Bafflement means confusion. Dispersed means to scatter here and there, right? So the whole thing, the speech of the boss and the poet, so all these things lasted for about 1 hour, and the poet left after that, and the entire staff of Gemini studio also scattered in utter bafflement. Means complete bafflement means confusion, right? So next, what are we doing? What is an English poet doing in a film studio which makes Tamil films for the simplest sort of people? So the questions in the mind of Fox were like what they were doing, right? So what that English poet has to do with the Gemini studio, with the film studio that makes Tamil films, and that too for those people who understand the simplest language, simplest themes, right? So people whose lives least afforded them the possibility of cultivating a taste for English poetry. It means those Tamil folks are so simple, right, that they are so innocent that they have very less possibility for cultivating a taste for English poetry. It means, it was probably in the mind of those staff members of Gemini studio that this English poet has come here in order to make his English poetry popular among the Tamilians, right? So they are misinterpreting things once again, overthinking. When people pay too much attention to other people's business, the same thing is there, right? So here the people are discussing that how can these mediocre people, how can these people understand English poetry? The poet looked pretty baffled too, right? Baffled, again confused. The poet also looked much confused, for he too must have felt the sheer incongruity of his talk about the thrills and travails of an English poet, right? Thrills and travails means excitements, right? So he is also completely baffled, completely confused, because he too have felt the sheer incongruity that he was making just a formality by talking of the excitements of an English poet. His visit remained an unexplained mystery. Unexplained mystery, right? Unexplainable thing. So the thing, the secret of which cannot be revealed, right? His visit remained a mystery to the staff of Gemini Studio. Next line. The great prose writers of the world may not admit it. The great prose writers of the world, right? So the writer says that the famous writers who write prose in this world may not admit it, but my conviction grows. Conviction means faith, or you may say when we have suspicion over somebody's thinking. My conviction grows stronger day after day that prose writing is not and cannot be the true pursuit of a genius. Now the writer is inclining himself towards a poet, right, instead of a prose writer. So he is saying that his faith grew stronger day by day. Faith about what? That prose writing is not and prose writing cannot be true pursuit of a genius, right? So he here feels that the true pursuit of a genius may be poetry, right? It is for the patient, persistent, persevering drudge. Drudge, one who does very hard work, right? So he talks here that it is for the patient, persistent, right? Patient and persistent, almost similar meaning. Persistent means constant. Preserving drudge, preserving hard worker, with the heart so shrunken means contracted, right? With a heart so shrunken that nothing can break it, right? Means nothing can break that heart. Rejection slips don't mean a thing to him, right? Very important. So rejection slips were nothing for him. He at once sets about making a fresh copy of the long prose piece and sends it on to another editor, enclosing postage for the return of the manuscript. So he did the same way as it is usually done by the people, that if some post is not delivered to somebody that they have sent, the mail would automatically come back to them, right? So same is the case that is happening with the emails these days, right? So here it is written that rejection slips don't mean a thing to him, and he at once sets about making a fresh copy, right, a new copy of the long prose writing, and sends it on to another writer, another editor, right? If that is not accepted by one editor, he used to send it to another editor. Enclosing means attaching postage for the return of the manuscript. That means he ensured its return in case it is not delivered to the righteous person. Next line. It was for such people that the Hindu had published a tiny announcement, small announcement, in an insignificant corner of an unimportant page, right? That's very clear. It was for such people that the Hindu, the publication house of a newspaper, had published a tiny announcement, small announcement, that in an insignificant corner of an unimportant page. Metaphorically confused line, that means they have published a small announcement in an insignificant corner, means where we or the, you may say, readers do not pay attention in corners of the newspaper, and that too on that page on which all the other unimportant things are mentioned, right? A short story contest organized by a British periodical by the name The Encounter. I hope that's clear, right? Of course, the encounter was not a known commodity among the Gemini literary, right? The encounter was not a known commodity. It was not a known thing among the Gemini literary. Literary means the literate people there. I wanted to get an idea of the periodical before I spent a considerable sum in postage sending a manuscript to England, right? So he says that he wanted to get a fair idea of that periodical before he spent a considerable amount of money in posting and sending that manuscript to England, right? So come to the next page. In those days, the British Council Library had an entrance with no long-winded signboards and notices to make you feel you were sneaking into a forbidden area. Sneaking, entering, right? So you are entering, moving stealthily in a forbidden area, right? So in those days, previous old times, the British Council Library had an entrance, right, with long winded signboards. It means there were big announcements and notices that would make people feel that they are entering stealthily into an area which is forbidden, right, which should not be visited. And there were copies of the encounter lying about in various degrees of freshness, almost untouched by the readers. So the writer here is stressing that the encounter, this draft, was not touched by most of the people. It was very fresh. It was like the copies of the encounter were lying very fresh, untouched, right? When I read the editor's name, I heard a bell ringing in my shrunken heart, contracted heart, right? So see what occurred to the poet's mind on reading the name of the editor. It was a poet who had visited the Gemini studios. I felt I had found a long lost brother, and I sang, I sealed the envelope and wrote out his address. I felt that he too would be singing the same song at the same time. Long lost brothers of Indian films discover each other by, singing the same song in the first reel and in the final reel of the film. Stephen Spander. Stephen, that was his name. The writer took such long time in revealing the name of such a famous poet, that was Stephen Spander. It means this is how the writer discovered his name when he read it as the editor of the encounter, right? So I hope that's clear. So next paragraph. And years later, when I was out of Gemini studios and I had much time but not money. Sometimes we have a lot of money but we don't have time. Now the writer is talking of the stage when he had left Gemini studios. He was out of that studio and he had a lot of time but he was not carrying much money. Anything at a reduced price attracted my attention. Obviously, children, when the person is in such a age and in such a financial condition, when his pocket is not filled, right, pocket is not filled, at that time that person would obviously be attracted by everything that has a reduced price, that bears less price, right? On the footpath in front of the Madras Mount Road post office, there was a pile of brand new books for 50 paise each. Very interesting thing. On the footpath in front of Madras Mount Road post office. Note down the address, right? So on that post office, there was a pile of, right, pile, heap of, means book over book of brand new books were available, and that too for 50 paisa each book was priced 50 paisa only. Actually they were copies of the same book, right? So those were the copies of one book, same book. An elegant paperback of American origin. Elegant paperback was also of American origin. Special low priced student edition. In connection with the 50th anniversary of the Russian Revolution, I paid 50 paise and picked up a copy of the book The God That Failed. See the satire of the writer. He paid 50 paisa and he got the copy of a book entitled The God That Failed, right? So that was especially low priced. You know what are student editions? So children, student editions are available for for a very few books that are extremely expensive, but in order to make students purchase those books, the teacher's copy, suppose I encountered a book for which the price of teacher's copy was 1900 something and for student copy it was 400 something, right? So much can be the difference. So here it is written special low price student edition, means anybody could purchase that, but that was a student's edition, right? No difference was there in the content. So he says that he purchased the book entitled The God That Failed, right? 6 eminent men of letters means educated men. 6 eminent means famous, right? 6 famous men of letters in 6 separate essays described their journey into communism and their disillusioned returned. Disillusioned, that is, you mean free from illusions, right? So in that book, 6 eminent writers had written 6 separate essays. What they have described? Their journey into communism and their free of illusion return from communism. It means they may have become communists, but they have returned to their previous stage, right? So those names are the writers. The names of writers were, remember, Andre Gide, Richard Wright, Ignazio Solon, Arthur Koestler, Louis Fisher, and Stephen Spender. Right? I repeat, those were Andre Gide, Richard Wright, Ignazio Solon, Arthur Koestler, Louis Fisher, and Stephen Spender. Remember Stephen Spender? Suddenly, the book assumed tremendous significance. Tremendous means so much importance. Tremendous means too much. Significance means importance. Right? So, suddenly, the book gathered a lot of importance. Stephen Spender, the poet who had visited Gemini Studios. Yes. In a moment, I felt a dark chamber of my mind lit up by a hazy illumination. Right? Hazy means something that is not clear. Illumination means lighting. Right? So, the writer felt that a dark chamber of his mind was lit up by a, you may say, unclear light. Right? The reaction to Stephen Spender at Gemini Studios was no longer a mystery. It means he really felt that Stephen Spender is a name in literature. Right? The boss of the Gemini Studios may not have much to do with Spender's poetry, but not with his God that failed. Again, he has put a satire. He has put a question mark. Right? What he says, concluding the lesson, the boss of Gemini Studios may not have much to do with Spender's poetry. It means their boss of Gemini Studios may not be interested in the poetry written by Stephen Spender, but yes, he was of course interested in the book in which Stephen Spender had written that essay. Yes, the name of the book is, as I told you, The God That Failed. Right? So he must have been a fan of this type of communism. So, directly or indirectly, the writer has imposed a kind of satire on his boss as well, on the communist tendencies of the people at that time and the communist tendency of his boss. He may mean that his boss had become a communist earlier and later on he changed his viewpoint, or he may have remained communist as well. Right? So, understanding the text, we may conclude that all in all, by the title Poets and Pancakes, the writer has touched a big issue of communism. Like, he didn't want to write about the poets. He didn't want to write about that makeup brand Pancake. That was just a pretext, right? That was just taken as an excuse by the writer. So everything he has written with his own experience and exploration of the people and their natures. So all in all, I would say that the author had literary inclinations, of course, right? So he wanted to take part in the story writing competition that as per we read as per the announcement in the Hindu, that a short story contest was being organized by British periodical The Encounter, right? He wanted to take part in that as well, right? When he read the name of the poet Stephen Spender there, he recalled the same poet had visited Gemini Studios, right? So he purchased the book The God That Failed. Means all those things, vivid description of the character sketch of Kothamangalam Subbu, the vivid description of the office boy come man, right? So touching of communism, that's a political order that believes in the equality of citizens and abolition of private ownership, right? So that's a kind of political order. I hope that's clear. I repeat, it's a political order that believes in the equality of all the citizens and abolition of private ownership, right? The state or nation is the owner and caretaker of every citizen, The state or nation is the honor and caretaker of every citizen, and citizens' welfare is the prime concern of the nation, right? Citizens' welfare, citizens' fulfillment of the needs is the prime concern of nation. So it sometimes resorts to armed revolution to establish and fulfill, social and political equality, right? So I hope you may be clear with the lecture. So children, I humbly request you to listen to this audio twice or thrice, since this is one of the most difficult chapters, right? And yes, of course, the next test we would have would be of these chapters. So I advise you to listen to it again and again for better understanding, right? So you may leave your comments in the drop down box below, and you can discuss your doubts with me over that Zoom session which we'll have, right? So solve the question answers. The answer key would also be shared to you the very next day. Stay tuned, stay home. Thank you.